Merry Christmas, everyone, or should I say, Merry Smismas. I'm here today acting as Santa, with TF2 items acting as children. Wait. Anyways, now is the time for happiness and forgiveness and all that sappy shit you think about when you're trying to come up with a present for your mother-in-law and don't want to tell her that you hate her guts. The TF2 weapons, however, have been very naughty this year, and have now earned themselves one Nerf each, and I want to talk to you about them. I will be categorizing these Nerfs based on 6 factors: adding one stat, changing one stat, removing one stat, no random crits, resupply not working, and a final secret category that we will save until the end of the video. There are some rules that I need to cover. I will not be giving any weapon a buff to balance out the nerf. They will only be getting nerfs. I will also not be giving any weapons more than one nerf, with a very, very specific exception. As well, there are some categories that we will not cover, those being any stock weapon, any weapon reskin, as stock doesn't need any nerfs, and weapon reskins are just reskins of whatever is already getting a nerf, excluding the stock reskins which aren't getting any nerfs anyway. If you want to see weapon reskin changes, go watch Great Blue's videos about them. Also, I'm not going to be covering the original or any of the Pyroland weapons. I also want to say that there will be a few of these that mathematically will most likely go into decimal points. Just know that I don't really care. These nerfs will range with how much they damage a weapon's usefulness. They can go from slight numbers change to, dear god, the gas passer has only one thing going for it, please don't remove the one thing it has. I want to go over one final thing before starting. The weapon before the nerf will be shown on the left side of the screen, and the weapon after the nerf will be shown on the right side of the screen, just for your viewing convenience. I don't want to spend too much more time on this, so let's just get right into the video. We'll start with the simplest to explain: resupply not working for the weapon. There are 5 weapons in this category, those being Bonk, the Criticola, Girardi, the Flying Guillotine, and the Sandwich. The first 4 can just be used right out of spawn, and replenished through spawn. Girardi and Criticola especially benefit from this, as both of them basically have the effects of a buff banner, Girardi more so. If Girardi can just repeatedly be thrown from spawn, where Sniper sometimes is close to anyway due to the sight lines, it can be an instant win for some teams. Bonk is on-demand invincibility that can be replenished infinitely through spawn, which can cause Scout to just rush past the enemy on some maps. The Guillotine is also on-demand bleed, and the recharge is fast enough anyway, so it doesn't really need that extra benefit. Finally, the Sandwich is a free 300 health that can be given to teammates as a medium health pack as well. It can already be replenished with any health kit, it doesn't need to be replenished with the resupply locker as well. That's basically all that was in that category. Some weapons just need to be kept away from the respawn cabinet. For this next one, I'll just be skimming through all of it just like the previous one, that being no random crits. The weapons that get no random crits are the Sharpened Volcano Fragment, the Boston Basher, the Disciplinary Action, the Holiday Punch, the Power Jack, the Scotsman's Skull Cutter, and the Sun on a Stick. A few of them are self-explanatory, but some are a little bit different. The Sharpened Volcano Fragment is a weapon that I didn't want to give any major nerfs to because it was already that bad. The Boston Basher having no random crits keeps the weapon from doing a massive amount of damage as well as bleed. The Disciplinary Action may be a little confusing for some people, but some more experienced people in the TF2 community may understand this. The Disciplinary Action is buggy. It has a lot more range than normal, meaning that getting a random crit on something that you thought you were out of range of is not exactly fair. The Holiday Punch loses its random crits so that it isn't able to easily stuff Ubers, due to already being able to pierce Uber charges anyway. This rewards the Heavy with good positioning, something that he should already be doing anyway. The Power Jack, well, the extra move speed allows Pyro to catch up to some players easier for their random crits, and can cause them to do things like this.
Okay, so he gets health. Come on. You know what? We'll fight mano-y-mano.
The next up is the Scotsman's Skull Cutter, which is pretty self-explanatory. The extra damage causes a higher chance for random crits, which deal 234 damage, which would cause even more random crits, which are absolutely not needed for something this powerful, so I decided to remove them from the weapon. The Sun on a Stick has a different reason. It's already a bad weapon, but there's already a situation where it gets guaranteed crits, so I decided that the easiest way to nerf it without maybe destroying the weapon is to remove random crits. Now that's all the simple stats out of the way, it's time to get on to the more complicated ones, the ones that require a lot more information for each. I'll show the list of items that I will talk about next, those being the items where I added a stat that is a nerf. I'll go through how it's listed in my folder, so it will be out of order by class, sadly. First off, we'll start with the Amputator, where I added a 20% slower firing speed, so you can't really fight with it, and you have to use it more for healing. Next up is the Base Jumper, which I've added the stat of no air control, meaning you can still negate fall damage, but you can't change where you land unless you rocket jump into a wall or something. So, for a little demonstration on how the base jumper actually works, just imagine like a soldier, my amazing drawing skills, rocket jumps up to here, and he's on a trajectory to head like here, if he doesn't do anything, but he deploys the base jumper. So, instead, going down here, and instead of actually just stopping in midair, what happens is, just glides across where he was already going. But he can't use like WASD for all that, that's out of the question. Instead, he has to like reach a wall or something so he can blast jump off of that and further traverse. So yeah, there's the explanation. For the Bushwalker, I lowered the damage by 20% to keep it from one-shotting Pyro and Demos that don't have the booties equipped. The Candy Cane is more logic-oriented than a few of these. I added a damage penalty to it because it isn't going to hurt too much being hit with a Candy Cane, despite how hard it is. The Cleaner's Carbine, I gave something simple, a 20% less accurate stat, just to make it worse from mid to long range. For the Eureka effect, I decided to give a little bit of a unique stat. I just felt like adding this for a single weapon, so I chose this one. I decided to add the stat that people running this are unable to get metal from the payload, which could incentivize going back to spawn using the Eureka effect's unique ability. Next up, I gave the Eyelander a damage penalty, since Demonite usually gets a guaranteed crit on 2 out of 3 of his shields anyway. For the Gru, no, not that Gru, the Gloves of Running Urgently, I decided to re-add the old stat of it marking you for death when you take it out. It's a nerf, so I decided to put it in. For the Holy Mackerel, I decided to add a damage penalty, considering you're hitting people with a fish, and being hit with a fish probably wouldn't hurt much, so a damage penalty is fair enough. Next is the Huntsman, which I decided to add a damage penalty, but only to buildings, considering if you shot an arrow at a metal building, it probably wouldn't do much damage to it. The Killing Gloves of Boxing are something that can be very powerful in the right hands, so I decided to give it a damage penalty to make it less likely to kill an enemy, which would give guaranteed crits. For the Machina, there's not much I can really do to it, so I decided to add a stat that incentivizes full charging before shooting, giving Sniper a minus 15% damage penalty to uncharged shots if they're using the Machina. Now, the Panic Attack used to have only 4 shells in its clip, back when it was a glorified Beggar's Bazooka's shotgun, so I decided to bring that back with a clip size reduction. The Flog is an annoying weapon, I will not argue with that, letting you get guaranteed crits if you deal enough fire damage, which is bullshit. That's why I decided to give it a minus 25% damage penalty. That doesn't help with its combination with the Scorch Shot, but it makes the weapon a little bit less powerful. The Red Tape Recorder is next, which is already a bad weapon, but I'm giving a nerf to any weapon anyway, so the Red Tape Recorder is on the chopping block sadly. I had a 15-second cooldown to placing down the Red Tape Recorder. Enough said. The Shahansha I gave a 20% slower swing speed so that it doesn't deal the increased damage as fast as it usually does. The Solemn Vow used to be a direct upgrade to stock, until they added this 10% slower swing speed. I'm gonna make it even less of a direct upgrade by giving it a negative 25% damage penalty on top of its slower firing speed, so you're punished for having it out. Speaking of direct upgrades, the Third Degree is a direct upgrade from stock. with no downside whatsoever. Doesn't make it any good though. I decided to give it a 25% damage penalty just so it has some kind of downside. Finally, for the winger, I decided it should be something that hits hard but is a little bit slower, so I gave it a 15% slower firing speed so that I could fill that role. Finally, through all that, now to go on to removing his stat, which I added to quite a few weapons, all of which I'll put on screen now to avoid listing everything. We'll start with the booties, where I removed the 25% charge that you get on melee kills, making it a little bit worse on Demo Night, but I don't think it's unusable. The Crusader's crossbow is one that I didn't want to nerf too hard, so I just decided to remove the ability for it to reload while not active. Since right now all that you do is shoot a bolt, heal someone, and then shoot another bolt without having to take any time out of healing to reload. While we're on that topic, I also did that with the detonator as well as the flare gun. You may be wondering why I didn't do that for the scorch shot also. Well, we'll get to that. For the Darwin's Danger Shield, I decided that I had to just remove one of these, so I decided to remove the afterburn immunity and keep the fire damage resistance. So it's still good against those flare shooting pyros, but you still have to run for a health kit if you don't want to take too much damage. For the Frontier Justice, I decided to change it so that sentries will no longer give you crits for assist kills, and only for regular kills. This promotes a little bit more of an aggressive playstyle, as some engineers can just sit on the side while their building only gets assist kills. For the Mad Milk, I removed the stat that reduces the cooldown by 20% if you extinguish a burning teammate. Scout is already up in the front lines anyway, so he should have the decision to choose whether to extinguish his burning teammate or cover the enemies in a non-milk substance. Alright, you know what? Let's have a little speed round here. I'll go through a few of these at a faster speed since some might not need much explaining, but whichever ones do, I'll give a slight explanation for. Alright. The Natasha loses its weird damage resistance, the Atomizer loses its mini crits while airborne, the Extinguisher loses its small speed boost it gives, even if it was pretty useful, I'm sorry. The Buffalo Steak Sandwich loses its ability to be given as health, making it only be used for yourself. The Claymore loses the 25% shield charge that it gives on kill. I think it should just be used for charging further and not getting it back. The Cowmangler loses its charge shot, which is not too many used to begin with, so I don't know how many people will be upset with it being gone. The Fanowar loses its ability to crit anytime it will mini crit. The Enforcer loses its damage piercing. I know it's sad, but there's definitely worse that could have been done to it. The Family Business loses its extra clip size, making it a weaker version of stock that fires faster. The Widowmaker loses its 10% damage bonus to the sentry's target. The Shortstop loses its shove, it was useless to begin with. The Neon Annihilator loses its ability to move sappers, the Homewrecker does it better. The Rocket Jumper loses its extra reserve ammo, so that the rocket and jumping soldiers can learn to conserve it better anyway. The Cookie Bomb Launcher loses its ability to destroy enemy sticky bombs. I removed the Mantras Air Blast resistance. The Man Melter loses its ability to regenerate 20 health after extinguishing an enemy. The Palmsy projectile can now be deflected, as well as the Bison's. The Scottish Resistance loses its increased firing speed. The Thermal Thruster no longer pushes enemies back when you land. The Reserve Shooter loses its deploy speed increase. The Loose Cannon no longer pushes players back, and the Rap Assassin loses its increased recharge rate. Wow, that was quite a bit. Funny thing is that there's still 9 more weapons to cover within this section. Don't worry, I won't have any other speedrun moments. Next up on the chopping block is the Diamondback, which I decided to give only crits on backstabs, since it's bullshit for a spy to backstab an engineer, sap all of the buildings, and then instantly have 102 damage crits to use on the engineer's entire team. Now the Gas Passer already sucks, and it has ever since it was added. You know how for the longest time enemies covered in gas wouldn't count as wet, and then Valve finally fixed it? Yeah, we're gonna remove that. I'm so sorry. The Gunslinger no longer has its 3-punch crit, but I don't know how much use many players are getting out of it. I don't play Engineer that much, so I wouldn't know. The Liberty Launcher loses its extra clip size, making it almost a worse version of stock, and the Lock and Load loses the increased projectile speed, keeping it consistent with the stock grenade launcher speed. The Razorback will now no longer refill on its own, and you need to go back to the resupply locker to get it back. This is to keep the Sniper from just camping in one place forever without any worry of a spy backstabbing them. Now the Scorch Shot, this is a nerf that I'm fairly proud of. For this one I want you to look at the before and after pictures of it. Do you see it? I removed the stun effect from the Scorch Shot. Pretty cool, right? I removed the ability for the spy to get his spy sickle back after a set amount of time, and made it so you could only get it back using the ammo boxes. And for the Sydney Sleeper, I removed the ability for the Sydney Sleeper to reduce Girardi's cooldown. I really don't understand why hitting a headshot on a sniper rifle would cause Sniper to want to take a piss sooner. Finally done with 4 of the categories, we have just 2 left. For this next category, I changed 1 stat for each of the weapons. Considering there are so many of these, instead of going one at a time, I will put these into little subcategories. I'll go through the list, and if there's a change that I also did for other weapons, I will group those weapons in with that weapon. Starting off with the Babyface's Blaster, or the BFB. I reduced the clip size from 4 shots to 3 shots. Simple enough. Similarly, considering they're in the same set, I reduced the clip size on the Pretty Boy's pocket pistol to be the same clip size as the Winger, meaning you'll have to reload more often with its faster firing speed as well. Also similarly, though not in the same set, I changed the black box to only have 2 rockets, so you can only gain up to 40 health before reloading. Speaking of good health, the kunai is considered quite a good weapon in the hands of a good spy, or even a mediocre one at that. 1 backstab means they gain a ton of health, so I just decided to decrease their max health to 65 instead of 70, so if they get into melee range with somebody, which spy usually does for a backstab anyway, all they need is a melee swing to take you out, excluding of course if you already backstabbed someone, as well as if we take scout and other spies into consideration. Speaking of less health, the Sandman goes from bad to useless, when you now have 25 less health than before, meaning Scout can be one-shot by a pipe. Sorry! Yeah, the Vitasaw also reduces your health, I guess. I just made it take away 5 more health, taking the penalty from 10 to 15. Now for the L'Étranger, I don't know if I said that right, I reduced the cloak on hit slightly from 15% to just 10%, so it's still useful for getting cloak back, but not as useful. You know what else gets cloak back? The Big Earner. It gains extra cloak on kill, not on backstab, on kill. I decided to just cut that in half, from 30% to just 15%. Back to the topic of clip size, the Airstrike, which I gave a reduction in the explosion radius, meaning you have to be at least a little more precise with your aims when you're dive bombing basically anyone. Now if you want to be even more precise with your aims, use the direct hit, which I nerfed, where I took away all of the explosion radius. Now you have to be super precise with your aiming. The Iron Bomber thankfully didn't get nerfed as hard as that, but I still decreased the explosion radius by 10%. For the Ambassador, there's not really much I could do with it that doesn't make it useless, so really all I did was just reduce the firing speed further. For the Backscatter, it's very boring as a weapon. Oh wow, you can just flank with it, like you can't just flank with any other weapon. I decided to just make it less accurate and move on. There's not really much else I could do. For the Back Scratcher, I decided to make it so you get no health from healers, meaning that you have to rely on health packs. I also added this downside to the Equalizer and the Escape Plan, meaning they also need to focus on health packs to regain their health. Not that many people use the Equalizer to begin with, but I also did this with the Fists of Steel, but not to an extreme extent. You can use your increased effective health that you get from the Fists of Steel to move to a health kit, but you could still be healed by anything else. Next up is the Backburner, where I increased the air blast cost to use 100 ammo, meaning you can only air blast twice. For this next one, I kind of broke my own rule and changed 2 things on the battalion's backup, but they're basically part of the same part of the item. I reduced the sentry damage reduction as well as the normal damage reduction to 35% and 25% respectively. There are 2 other weapons that reduce damage, so let's go through them, shall we? I reduced the Charge and Targe's fire damage resistance from 50% to 30%, and finally, the Wrangler. I just halved the damage that it absorbs, so it absorbs 33% instead. For the Bizarre Bargain, I decided to make it harder to snowball with the weapon by decreasing the base charge by an extra 25%, meaning you need to work at least a little harder for your increases. Next up, the Beggar's Bazooka, which I changed from a +3 degree random projectile deviation up to a +5 degree random projectile deviation, possibly making it useless. Next up, the Blutsauger, where I changed it from less health regeneration on wear to no health regeneration on wear, promoting using it to attack for your health regeneration. On the topic of less extra health, I removed the Quick Fix's ability to give overheal, and have it just be a quick fix for your team when they're damaged. Next up is the Brass Beast. People like to say that's basically a sentry weapon, so I decided to lean into that, making so you can't move at all while it's deployed. The buff banner was simple to change. I just removed the part where you can buff your team and make it so you only buff yourself. For the classic, it really doesn't need any nerfs, but I'm sorry yet again. I just reduced the body shot damage by an extra 10%. For the Cloak and Dagger, I kept it basically the same mechanically, but I had it so that regaining it was harder from ammo boxes, and just reduced it from 35% less from ammo to 50% less from ammo. For the Conch, I just decided to reduce the health regenerated per second on wear from 4 to 2. Funnily enough, that was the exact same thing I decided to do with the Cozy Camper. For the Delocus Bar, I decided to just reduce the health you regain slightly from 100 to 75, but kept the extra 50 max health it gives you. I also decided to give that nerf to the second banana, making it heal 150 health instead of 200, meaning half instead of over half. For the already oppressive Dead Ringer, I decided to just increase the cloak you lose once Feign Death is activated, meaning you don't have nearly as long to get away before hearing that loud decloak sound. For the Degreaser, I just have the deploy speed increase. I didn't want to make it absolutely useless with damage, and I decided to just still make it useful for combos, but still give it some kind of nerf so it isn't as good with combos. For the Dragon's Fury, I decided to just half the repressurization rate on hit, so it isn't as easy to just mow down people in a 1v1 with good aim. For the Eviction Notice, I didn't want to take away its speed increase, so I decided to take away a little bit of a different speed it had. I took away 15% of its faster firing speed. For the Force of Nature, I took away 10% more of its damage, just because. Similarly, I took more damage away from the Home Wrecker so that it's easier to wreck homes, not people, doubling the penalty from 25% to 50%. The Hot Hand already has a bug damage penalty, but I decided to just increase the damage penalty anyway, from minus 20% to minus 35%. I also reduced the damage of the Tribalman Shiv, but I didn't increase the bleed time. Sorry, Grouch. For the Gunboats, I took away half of the blast damage reduction for rocket jumps, so now it reduces the damage by 30% instead of 60%. For the half Zatoichi, I decided to re-add something that was introduced when the weapon came out, the original honor-bound system. The weapon cannot be sheathed at all until it kills. Next up, the Hitman's Heatmaker, where I changed the focus to only be obtained through kills and not assists, just like the Frontier Justice. Now for the Huo Long Heater, where I changed the additional ammo consumed from 4 per second to 6 per second. If you're using it on the payload cart, it might not make much of a difference anyway. Now for the Jag. I think that's too easy to keep buildings up, so I'm going to take a page out of Grouch's book and decide to make the repair rate slower, but not increase the build time, changing it from 20% to 40%. For the Kritzkrieg, I just reduced the Uber charge rate by 5%, nothing too special, don't worry. Now for some firing speed changes. I changed the Market Gardener to have a slower swing speed, meaning soldiers need to time their swings better if they want to land that crit. I did the same thing to a few other weapons, such as the Ubersaw, which is already extremely powerful in the right hands. I decided to increase the firing speed penalty for it from 20% to a whopping 50%. For the Ullapool Caber, the firing speed was changed to be the same as the Market Gardener, being 35% slower. Finally, for firing speed changes, I changed the Tomislav to have a 35% slower firing speed instead of its usual 20% slower firing speed. That's it, really. For the final stretch of the list, we start off with the Overdose. I thought that maybe an extra 20% movement speed could be something that I could tone down, so I did. I just reduced it slightly, however, so that instead it increases your move speed by 15% instead of a 20%. For the Pain Train, I replaced a 10% bullage damage vulnerability with a 25% all damage vulnerability, making Soldier's effective health about 160 and Demoman's effective health about 140, obviously excluding if the Soldier has the battalion's backup or if the Demoman has the booties equipped. The Persian Persuader I turned into just a mainly Demo Knight sword, removing all of the primary reserve ammo from Demoman when he uses it. For the Rescue Ranger, I did a simple numbers change, and changed the 4-to-1 metal to healing ratio into a 6-to-1 metal to healing ratio. Next up is the Short Circuit. I won't spend too long on this, all I did was change the primary fire's ammo/metal consumption from 5 to 10. For the Soda Popper, I have the firing speed increased so that it doesn't have as much potential for burst damage as it usually does. For the Southern Hospitality, I increased the fire damage vulnerability so that if the engineer is caught by a pyro out of position, he can be more easily burned down. For the Splendid Screen, I just decided to tone down how fast you recharge your shield, meaning that you can't just spam it too often. For the Sticky Jumper, I decided to reduce the amount of stickies you could place on the ground by 1, thus limiting the Demoman's movement a little bit more without completely negating his ability to move around with the Sticky Jumper. For the Tide Turner, I just decreased the charge you get from a melee kill by 25%, making it go from 75% to 50%. For the Warrior Spirit, I wanted to keep the damage bonus, so I just halved the health you gain on kill, going from 50 to 25 health gained on kill. Finally, there's your Eternal Reward, where all I did was increase the cloak drain rate up to 50%, making cloaking even less possible with it equipped. Phew, finally got through everything, except for the final category, the secret category I have been keeping from you all this whole video. You probably already know what it is due to the process of elimination, but here we go. The Vaccinator is fucking bullshit. I hate every little fucking bit of it, and it should have never been added to TF2 to begin with. You want a nerf to the Vaccinator? Remove it from the game. It has no place here. Look at this. I'm using the brass bees with crits, and this heavy will not die! I hate the Vaccinator so much! Alright. Let's just calm down a bit and get into the serious stuff. Not that nerfing the Vaccinator is not serious, I'm mainly running on hatred right now. I think that I shouldn't be running on hate when I'm doing this. So let's just get right into the actual nerfs. Remember that one particular weapon I was talking about earlier? It's actually this one. So this dumbass weapon is getting quite a few nerfs. First off, I'm halving the uber charge rate from plus 66% to plus 33%. Next, I'm removing the passive 10% resistance that happens when you switch to any of the resistances. Stacked with the uber charge and had no right to do so. I also reduced the uber charge resistance to block 50% of the base damage and 75% of the crit damage. Now, instead of the fully overhealed heavy having 1,800 effective health, a fully overhealed heavy now only has 900 effective health. Finally finished with that monster of a script. This is definitely one of my bigger videos, and I really wanted to get this finished for Christmas. Put quite a bit of effort into this, so please consider subscribing. It means a lot. And you can always change your mind if my videos aren't your style. Try my best to upload consistently, but that isn't always possible. I also have a Discord server. Right now it isn't very active, but you can change that. I had a new channel where I can discuss with viewers about TF2 balance changes that I could possibly put into a video. Again, none of these have been tested, but if someone who knows more about coding than me wants to maybe put these changes into effect, I'd love to see it. I also have a channel membership. Right now, channel members have certain benefits, such as being able to watch videos early and sneak peeks into my future videos. The benefits only cost about $1 a month, so consider becoming a member. I also want to know, what nerfs would you give to the TF2 weapons? Answer in the comments, share this around, and YouTube thinks you'll like this video that's showing on screen right now, so why don't you click it and see if you like it. But until next time, peace out. Merry Christmas.